All right, so I just asked you to come up with some yeah, but sort of exceptions to the story that I just told. And you know, you have probably, if you've written down those objections, chances are that you've named some reasons why markets don't actually get to this precise point here where that we've drawn before, where private marginal cost equals private marginal benefit, the Pareto optimal point. Um, and uh, and and so if you've jotted down reasons why that might not be true, what you've probably struck upon is um, some sort of components of the definition of market failure. And market failure, just to be clear, is when uh, markets fail to reach Pareto efficiency, uh, efficiency, which is also known as private marginal cost equaling private marginal benefit. Or, sometimes you'll hear marginal private cost equals marginal private benefit. Um, so that's market failure, and like there's lots of things that go into market failure. Lots of reasons that private marginal cost and private marginal benefit might not be equated. Like sometimes there's problems with information, or maybe the assumptions that we need to make about the mindsets of the individuals are wrong, or sometimes there's something about the good itself that makes the markets fail. And actually, typically in environmental economics, it's these things that are our focus. And the phenomenon that leads to a major market failure in the oil market is what's called an externality. And so I'm going to add this onto our little definitions page, externality. And an externality is simply a cost or a benefit imposed on somebody outside of the transaction. I like putting it this way because the outside word sort of connects back with this idea of externality. It's external to the producer and consumer side, right? It's an impact being felt on some third party that's not party to the transaction at play. And so, how does this look in our supply and demand graph? Well, it means that we're not going to get this Pareto optimal allocation. And instead, let's suppose that basically what we had been sort of implicitly assuming is that private marginal cost equals social marginal cost, right? That is in our sort of perfectly competitive equilibrium market model. That's what's implicitly going on. But actually, in an externality, and we're gonna make this a production externality, which means that we're looking at the supply side of the market. But I think you'll see that this could be equivalently beyond the demand side of the market. Um, we're thinking about the 21st century oil market. We're using oil for everything. It's jet fuel, it's plastics, and we've also realized that for every bit of oil that's supplied to the market, there's actually a a private or a social cost that is in addition to the cost that suppliers face, right? It's at each of these points, we've got an additional cost to society. And that's the cost that's due to greenhouse gases being emitted into the atmosphere and sort of causing global warming, right? And so what that leads us to see is that actually the social marginal cost is equal to this private marginal cost plus this external marginal cost. And the external marginal cost is just, this amount at each individual unit in the quantity space of oil. And we're just sort of making this a simple assumption that it doesn't, that it's linear. It's about the same amount, sort of regardless of how much oil is being produced. Um, but you can see now, if you've been tracking where these lines intersect, that we've got this point here. Um, so I'm gonna add these points here. So this was our market quantity in the market and the price in the market that we arrive at, right? But then we see that there's this other point here, which is the actual Q star, right? The optimal quantity and the optimal price, because this is actually where, this point here is where social marginal cost equals marginal benefit, which is the actual true Pareto optimal point. And there's an important sort of additional piece that we can look at here, which is that there's this amount of quantity and this amount of money, basically, where what's happening is that there's still transactions going on, right? Like this space here, between these two lines, you've got this amount of additional production. But at that production, notice that the social marginal cost line here is way up above the actual private marginal benefit. So for this quantity, right, this is it's what we like to call dead weight loss. And I'm sorry for tucking this label in here, but the basic point is that this is a loss to society. It's a damage basically done, right? Like it's an amount of oil that's produced that in aggregate leads to less welfare, right? Because there's costs being incurred that exceed the benefits that are derived from those costs in the market.